Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is my instant reaction breakdown of episode 3 of season 3 of House of the Dragon. Obviously, there are going to be some spoilers here if you've not seen the episode yet. Also, possibly for what happens later on in the books. The show is still roughly going along with the books, but there are some divides that have been getting bigger as we've been getting deeper into the series. So, that is your spoiler warning. But let's start off by just picking out where we were at last episode. You'll remember last time we were thinking that this is the real start of season 3. Episodes 1 and 2 should have been the finale, the ending point of season 2. The last shot should have been of Rhaenyra there on the throne, and the glance with Alicent. That was supposed to be the end of season 2 before budget cuts, etc. Meant that they put those 2 episodes at the beginning of season 3. That rounded off a whole load of story arcs for season 2. Season 3 starts here. So what we're looking for in this episode, as well as everything else, is the start of story arcs that will be carrying us through this next season. So we'll pick up on them as we go through. The second thing to say is that this is the much trailed conceptual episode. They told us in the build up to all of this that there was going to be one episode which would be different to the other House of the Dragon episodes, and also different to Game of Thrones episodes, in that it would be focused almost entirely on one person, working through them, their struggles, what's happening with them at that particular moment in time. And it's clear this is about Rhaenyra. I like this. I think it's actually very similar to, and I think you'll probably hear a lot of people say this because I think a lot of people will get the same thought, is that it's very similar to a Song of Ice and Fire POV chapter, in that we're focused in all of our time, we're following Rhaenyra around. It's not just about Rhaenyra. Her story obviously intersects with a lot of other different characters. Alicent's there. We get Corlys there. We get the Dragon Seeds are there. So her story intersects with others, but more than we usually do when we're chopping between different characters in an episode. We get to actually pause for a moment and just consider what's going on with her. Where's her mind at? Where's her heart at this time? What's she trying to achieve? And actually push her story along a reasonable amount. I say a reasonable amount. This episode seems to span a few days. So when we're not talking about just a matter of a few hours, but this is also not a very long period of time. This is the first bit of time after she has taken power. How does she manage? How does she rule? That, and I think actually this is the first sort of big arc that we're going to be looking at, is kicked off here. How is ruling? She's been thinking about this for so long. How is this going to affect Rhaenyra? How is she going to be as a ruler? Is she going to rule wisely? Is she not going to rule wisely? Is she going to be firm? Is she going to be magnanimous? How is that going to be working? So we're going to see that, I'm pretty sure, all the way through this season. And simply from this episode, we can already, I think, understand this is not straightforward for her. If she had any illusions about just sort of like becoming queen and then doing the thing and it would all be okay, I think that all comes crashing down in this episode. I think she realizes now there are huge problems. She's still at war and they've run out of money. We'll get to all of the issues in a moment, but actually just getting through unscathed is going to be a victory in and of itself. Okay, but the episode doesn't start there. The episode starts, the only bit of the episode that isn't focused in on Rhaenyra is with this open when Daemon is confronting Ormond Hightower. We heard tell of this army that's marching from Old Town towards King's Landing, Ormond Hightower there, heading it up. And crucially, they have a dragon because they've got Darren, who is the youngest son of pardon me, was the youngest sibling that we've got going on with Aegon and Aemond and on the rest of it. So he has basically been brought up in Old Town. There was this fantastic little scene, episode 2, where Alicent just talks to Gwaine Hightower and just sort of says, "What's he like?" She doesn't really know, and the response is he's good. He's grown up well adjusted. He's not been affected by all that's going on in King's Landing, so he still is a little bit of a mystery to us in this. Even through this episode, we don't really understand what he's like as a person. But the geopolitical thing here is probably too big a phrase for this. Daemon is here demanding they surrender, and it's a reasonable position he's in. So he's there. He's brought his back up. He's got Hugh and Ulf on their dragons. He's on his dragon. 3 big dragons. If they wanted to, they could take on Tessarion as still quite a small dragon. They could easily defeat their army and burn them all. So he's in a strong position, and he can say Rhaenyra's won. Aegon's disappeared. Aemond has gone. We're in control of King's Landing. Rhaenyra sits on the Iron Throne. The Triarchy fleet is destroyed. You now have to surrender. And Ormond does. There's a little bit of banter and to and fro, but he bends the knee. He accepts the slap, basically, and then says, "Okay, army, we'll head back to Old Town. All done." The deal there, the orders that Daemon seemed to have had from Rhaenyra are, if he surrenders, that's fine, let him go. The only thing is, Darren, what are they going to do about him? And Ormond again, small protest, but he gives up Darren. Now, obviously, at the end, we discover this isn't Darren. In fact, this is just someone, they've dyed their hair, and some poor kid who has been told, "You have to go and do this, or we'll do terrible things to your mother." So this is Ormond playing Darren. We don't know about that at the time, but this feels like, as it's set up here, this feels like just the next step. Rhaenyra, when we cut to her, she is now in this strong position. She is there in possession of King's Landing. The Triarchy fleet, they did a huge amount of damage, but they are gone. They are no longer a threat. The Hightower army has been turned back. She has got Darren here in her control. She's got Alicent and Helena as well, who they captured, leaving the city. She is thinking to herself, there's a few loose ends that need to be dealt with, but she is the victor. But she realizes, particularly for the people of King's Landing, they saw Aegon being crowned, and he because if you remember, they all got pushed into the dragon pit, so there was this massive crowd of witnesses there, and he was done the proper way. The Team Green were very keen on this, rightly. They decided, okay, well, we'll get the High Septon in. He's got Aegon the Conqueror's crown now on his head. The High Septon's going to do all of the stuff. He's going to have the sword Blackfire, the sword of the kings. This is a proper coronation. So Rhaenyra thinks, I need to do something now. I can't just come in and assume everybody knows that I'm queen. I need to come in. I'm going to have a big coronation, and we should do this properly. We should have tourneys. We should have processions. We should make sure that this is a big spectacle everybody knows. And you might raise a few spirits as well. Obviously, it's been a time of war. Let's spend some money. Let's do this properly. Which brings her to the first problem. They don't have any money. Team Green got themselves organized very quickly when it came to the finances. One of the very first things they talked about after the death of King Viserys was, what are they going to do about the money? And there in the books, they make it even more clear. They split the crown's money because they're in King's Landing. They have the money that the Iron Throne has. They split it 4 ways. A quarter of it went to Castley Rock, a quarter of it went to Old Town, a quarter of which went to the Iron Bank of Bravos. The other quarter they kept as this kind of fighting fund with the idea of hiring sellswords and things like that. So that money disappeared. Then the quarter that's left there, a lot of this will have been spent on things like getting the Triarchy on side, hiring some sellswords. So there's not much left. Laris also smuggling some out. He's also taken a lot of money out from Harrenhal as well. So there's not much left. In fact, we're told there's probably enough to keep going for 2 weeks or so, which is a bit of an issue. So what are they going to do about it? Well, first of all, they try to find people who might know where this money is. The problem is they've killed most of them already. So they have to manage. Now, to be fair to Rhaenyra, she does think on her feet quite quickly and come up with a few options about what they're going to do. First of all, she scales back her ideas about the coronation. She's like, okay, we can do that later. Now we'll just have an anointing now. We'll do all of the tourneys and big coronation another time. Secondly, we will write to all of the great houses and say, I'm your new queen, and I need you to pay me tribute. Send me cash, basically. Then thirdly, she's decided that she's going to try and get a bit more money, specifically out of Lady Jane Arryn. Now, you remember they had this negotiation, basically, where Jane Arryn said, I want to have a dragon to be protecting the Vale, and Rhaenyra is through Jace, but it's like, okay, well, we can't really do that, but, you can take some of the younger Targaryens, and here's some dragon eggs, and you'll send an army. And they kind of reached a kind of a weird agreement. Nobody seemed very happy about this. But now Rhaenyra is saying, well, they never sent that army, did they? So I'll take the cash instead. Thanks. So Daemon is now going to be going over to the Vale to get some money. And that, I suspect, is going to tie in with the Rhaena storyline, because we found out last episode, I think it was, that she's there now. She's in the Vale. If he flies in, he's also been commissioned to try and find Sheepstealer. So if he goes over there, gets the money, tries to find Sheepstealer, and he discovers actually the mysterious rider of Sheepstealer is his daughter, this is going to spark quite an issue, because what does he do? Does he report back to Rhaenyra? Take his own daughter back to Rhaenyra? Rhaenyra lost her son because of Rhaenyra's actions, I should say. Is Daemon going to do that? I suspect not, given the fact that in season 2, part of his arc then was this call back to be better as a better father. So probably we're going to end up, and this is kind of the merging with the Nettles storyline from Fire and Blood, we're going to end up with the situation where he and the rider of Sheepstealer get close. Rhaenyra discovers this somehow and gets very angry, and this leads to the rupture of the relationship between Daemon and Rhaenyra. So anyway, that's the sort of the first idea about how to get a bit of money for Rhaenyra. And through this, as she's trying to work out how to rule well, she has 3 broad advisors that we see here that are acting quite key in all of this. We get Daemon himself, we get Alicent, who is not really an advisor, but Rhaenyra does ask her questions about ruling and how to rule. And then we get Mysaria as well. And they come up with 3 different, they're not kind of like contradictory approaches so much as 3 different perspectives on how to rule. She wants to rule well. She wants to rule like her father would have wanted her to. Daemon thinks you got to be hard. You've got to be brutal. You've got to do the necessary things. And he thinks, first of all, you need to kill Daeron. he's potentially a threat. He is potentially a rival claimant. If, in his mind, if Aemond dies, which they're saying they have to kill Aemond, then who is the next person in that line? That's Darren. So he also has to go. He also seems to have been arguing that they shouldn't have spared Ormond Hightower. And he also gives her this even bigger pitch that they should be thinking, now they've got King's Landing, they should be thinking bigger. Why don't they invade Essos? They're the heirs to the Valyrian freehold, the last dragon riders. They should be ruling Essos as well as Westeros. And he pitches this great idea to her, this vision to her, including saying, I hear there's this city of winged men. Now, this is a place called Carcosa. We only hear about this in the world of Ice and Fire, so this is quite a deep cut here from the writers. But I like it. That is, if you imagine the map of Essos and you go past the Free Cities, past the Dothraki Sea, you get the great mountain range, then you get Yeti. If you keep on going and keep on going, then further on, there is a lake at the edges of which is this legendary city where there are supposedly winged men. We don't know. We don't know anyone who's been there. These are just legends and rumors. George R. R. Martin, he's very keen on this kind of immersive in-world idea that his world book is written by the Maesters. And the Maesters know less and less about the world the further away from Old Town you get. And so the further east you go to the other side of Essos, then the more mysterious it is, the more legendary the feel of this place is. And this is what Damon's saying. Let's go all the way over there. I've heard a rumor of it. It sounds amazing. Let's do it. So that is his vision. Now, I did, as a complete offhand wondering, I do wonder, he saw in his vision through the Weirwood Tree, which he mentioned again to Rhaenyra in episode 2. He saw this vision of what we know as Daenerys with dragons. Now, newly hatched baby dragons. Now, he doesn't know that that's Daenerys. He just will say, oh, well, this is a Targaryen in the desert. Now, they don't really, maybe he thought it was Dawn, but perhaps this is part of what, does he think this is actually in Essos that we're looking at? It was in Essos. He knows Essos, he's lived in Essos before. Is that what he thinks? Is he won't be imagining that the Targaryens lose their dragons for a long time and then they come back magically. That's not, as far as we know, that's not his understanding. Targaryens will keep dragons. So if he's seeing a Targaryen in the desert with baby dragons, he's probably thinking that maybe that's one of our descendants, which it is. But because we rule all of Essos. Just a random thought. Anyway, that's Damon's approach, and he is consistent with it. She sends him off basically to go off and do his errands that he's supposed to be doing, but he leaves her with this kind of vision and idea. Alicent, she's, I mean, the two of them, they've got this kind of weird relationship going on between the two of them. But it means that they both feel as if they've been done bad by the other in terms of this agreement they had. The agreement was Alicent would open up the gates, let Rhaenyra in, and hand over Aegon, and she would be allowed to go free. And from her perspective, that it's not worked because she's not been allowed to go free, and Rhaenyra killed Otto, her father, which was not part of the deal. But then you get Rhaenyra, who's thinking, well, the deal was that I would get Aegon, and Aegon is still out there somewhere, so you don't get to leave until Aegon's gone. But despite the clear anger on both sides, they they still have these kind of conversations. And Rhaenyra's asking, yeah, you've done this job, you effectively ruled for a little while. How do you do it? And Alicent's response is pretty clear, is that you can't remain yourself while doing this. It changes you. Rhaenyra doesn't like that idea, but they come to a sort of an understanding of a way forward, the two of them, which is that Otto's remains will be sent down to Old Town. That's a basic decency thing. That's the thing that Alicent comes to ask for, and Rhaenyra can do. It doesn't cost her anything. She can send those remains down there. But then Aegon, Alicent suggests, you could just say he's dead. Nobody would know otherwise. He doesn't look like Aegon anymore. He's had these really bad burn marks. He can barely move around. If he did suddenly turn up and say, hey, I'm Aegon, you could just say, no, you're not. It's not like he's got a massive power base right now. It's just him and Larys heading off somewhere. You can deal with that. Just say he's dead. Aemond, however, yeah, you've got to get rid of him. That's it. And once this has happened and Aemond is dead and Rhaenyra is secure on her throne, then Alicent can go as promised. But till then, she's basically under house arrest with Helaena and Jaehaera, who's being sort of held separately. So Aemond, we should probably talk about briefly. There's a throwaway remark that he's disappeared. We don't know where he is, which they will have to pick up on next episode, because Vhagar is massive. You can't just not know where Vhagar is. Vhagar landed at Harrenhal. Everybody will have known that. What's happened? Has he gone somewhere with Alice Rivers? So is she casting some sort of cloaking spell? We don't know. But that's a thing to keep an eye on. But Rhaenyra puts a bounty on Aemond's head. She's got people who, dragons that she can try and use to take him on. But if anyone else wants to have a go, why not? She's not got the money, but she can offer something else, which is Harrenhal itself. Because most of House Strong are gone, the only member of House Strong left is Larys Strong, and Larys, as we've seen, has headed off with Aemond, therefore he is a traitor, therefore she can give Harrenhal to whoever she wants. Now, Harrenhal is... this is hugely important, but also it's a bit of a cross to bear, partly because of it's a bit cursed and spooky dooky, but also partly because this is a massive castle. This is easily the biggest castle in the land. It takes a huge amount of money just in terms of upkeep. And if you want to repair it, because it's also broken and ruined, that would cost even more. Just heating, his Harren's Great Hall was legendarily big enough you could fit an entire army into it. So this is huge. If you want to heat that costs a lot. So anyway, she's now offering this, which is another slant on this who owns Harrenhal thing. And I suspect this will be a slow burn issue all the way through the rest of House of the Dragon, because in the books, the person who ends up in possession of Harrenhal is Alice Rivers, who wants it, who told Daemon that's what she wants, and Daemon basically said no, and Rhaenyra is now offering it to whoever kills Aemond. Which, I don't know. Does this mean technically that Daemon could have done it later? Perhaps. So anyway, that's that little bit dealt with. Rhaenyra then goes off to this idea about I need to be made queen. It's one thing sitting on the Iron Throne, another thing is to be officially queen, and that requires the High Septon. Now, she's scaled back everything, the coronation, tourneys, we're not doing any of that, but she does need to be anointed in front of some witnesses, the High Septon there saying the holy stuff, and that will make her the queen officially in the eyes of a whole lot of people. So she goes to him, and she seems to think this was, she thought this was the issue. She seems to be thinking, oh, I'm doing you a favor. We're not going to do a big thing. You can just do a little anointing. No biggie. But he comes back straight away and says, but you do know not that long ago, I anointed and crowned your half-brother, Aegon. How do I now do this for you? And she says, it's okay, he's dead. And he basically says, well, prove it. Because if the king is dead, then, and we know he was here in the Red Keep, if the king is dead, then surely I would have been told. And if I hadn't been told, then surely the Silent Sisters would have been told, because they're the people who are preparing the bodies of the dead. So then none of that happened. So as far as I'm concerned, he's still alive. I don't know where he is, but he's still alive. And I cannot, while I think he's still alive, I cannot make you queen. Which seems to kind of frustrate Rhaenyra a bit, as you would understand. And so she tries to speak his language and sort of say, okay, so the gods have clearly favored me. The gods clearly want me to be queen, because look, they gave me these extra dragons to be doing stuff, and then this is wrong. She gets this completely wrong. And his response, I copied it down because I think this is worth saying. Dragons are a profane magic created in darkness and pride and lust. These are very strong words. And this immediately takes us to a position where I think we got used to in sort of the Game of Thrones world until we got to the High Sparrow. The faith of this kind of like slightly ineffective organization, state-based, they're not going to really hold any strong views on things. They'll just do what the crown tells them to do. That is not the situation at this moment in time. The faith are true believers. And for most of the time that the Targaryens are in power, they had been set against the Targaryens, because the Targaryens, to them, are heretical. They come in with all of their polygamous, incesty marriages. They've got their saying, oh, well, we don't need to worry about the same rules as you. We're different to you. Hey, look, we've got these dragons. We've got our own old gods that are different to your gods. And so they had to be sort of put in their place by Aegon the Conqueror. And then when we get a niece, that there's a huge faith uprising that's still there. When we get to Maegor, it's still there. I mean, it kind of gets pushed back and down by people like Maegor, but it's still there when we get to Jaehaerys. Jaehaerys does manage to deal with it, and then does a little bit of PR work with this kind of like doctrine of exceptionalism, going around trying to get the people on his side to say the Targaryens are different. We'll respect the faith, but we need to have different rules because we're different and special. The faith kind of accept that. They know that they can't go against the Targaryens. The Targaryens do have too much power. At this moment in time, though, the faith is not based in King's Landing. The faith is still based in Old Town at the Starry Sept. And who else is at Old Town? The Hightowers. So the side that they're on, I think, is reasonably clear. And the High Septon then sort of backs all this up by saying, don't make an enemy of the faith, which is sort of a threat. And the fact that he can say this, it speaks a little bit to the fact that he knows that Rhaenyra is a lot weaker as a monarch than she perhaps thinks. But also, this is setting up what is to come. The storming of the Dragon Pit was not just a big rabble of people heading off and letting out their feelings about certain things. This was led by this guy called the Shepherd, who was a preacher of the Faith of the Seven, who was preaching that dragons are evil and immoral, and dark magic, basically. And that is why the people in the storming of the Dragon Pit, the people are angry. They didn't storm the Red Keep. They stormed the Dragon Pit because their anger is against the dragons as much as it was against the Targaryens. So this is just starting to set that up. Whether we see the Shepherd this season, I don't know. I suspect the storming of the Dragon Pit is a next season thing, but they are starting to sow the seeds here for where this is going to go. So keep an eye on that one. Then we should probably look at this idea of the Team Black's superiority in terms of dragon numbers, which is there. This is part of the reason why Rhaenyra can feel quite confident in her power, because if you think about the Team Black Team Green, sorry, their big advantage was they had Vhagar, who is massive. They've got Dreamfire, which is Helena's dragon, but she's not going to be riding that into battle. Then there was Sunfire, who is Aegon's dragon. Sunfire, as far as they're aware, was killed, badly injured, presumed dead. So not a threat to them. And then you've got Tessarion, all the way down, slightly off of their radar, in Oldtown. So if you've got a Sunfire, if Dreamfire is not going to be an issue, if the Tessarion is not going to be an issue because Daeron's been taken away, they've really only got one dragon to worry about, which is Vhagar, and they've got this massive superiority of numbers. But their massive superiority of numbers comes from the fact that they've got these dragon seeds, and they've got three there: Ulf and Hugh and Adam. And they've all been promised that they will be made knights, which is what happens here. Now, this should be a good moment, an establishing moment, a reward. This should be getting their people on side. However, it doesn't seem that it's all kind of underplayed, but it doesn't really go to plan. First of all, Daemon does the dubbing, putting the sword on the shoulders. I might read too much into this, but when you look at the first one, the Ulf is the first one he does, and he dubs him on both shoulders, and he charges him for 1/3 of the nightly charge, the nightly vows, and then he goes off and does the other third on the second, and then the other third there. So none of them get charged with all of it. So it's almost like they each get 1/3 of a knighthood, symbolically. So that's the first thing. The second is the names, because when you're a knight, you're not. You have to have a surname, really. Most of the small folk around there, they had their first name, and that was it. And maybe they would be known as the Miller or the whatever. But they didn't have surnames. Surnames, great house names, they're for the knights. And if you don't have that, then you are called of somewhere, generally. So Sir Arlen of Pennytree, he wasn't just Sir Arlen, he had to be Sir Arlen of something. If you remember, Dunk is asked, I'm Sir Duncan the what? And he panicked. He's not even thought about it, but it's Sir Duncan the Tall. So he has to come up with a thing, which the interesting thing there is, it's like, that's not what I was thinking. Where are you from? What are you, do you have a family name? And he's just going straight to descriptor. Dunk always slightly gets it wrong, but bless him. But here, Rhaenyra is saying to them, okay, you're going to be knights now. You need to have that second bit of your name. And so Ulf, what do you want? And Ulf says, I want to be Ulf Targaryen. And Rhaenyra is like, nah. That's not happening. Now, we've had a few times now Ulf saying his actually quite sad backstory. Um, and so this idea that he could be a Targaryen, that is part of who he is very strong in his mind. And now he's getting snubbed for it. Basically, he's been told, you're not a Targaryen. So he has to go with Ulf the White because of the white hair. And he's not happy with that. Now you can tell he thinks he's made for better things. He thinks he deserves a castle. He thinks he deserves a better surname. Um, he's now slowly building up this series of grievances. Yes, he's come up hugely in the world, but he's got this series of grievances going on. Second, we get Hugh. Now, Hugh, he comes up with Hugh Hammer. Why not? He was a blacksmith. He's thought about it. That's okay. Everyone's all right with that. But after the ceremony, he chases after Rhaenyra and sort of says, "Look, sorry to be a pain, but you mentioned like accommodation and stuff like that. Where am I going to be living? I've got a wife, and she is very busy." And she basically says, "Look, yes, you will. There'll be something over. Yeah, I'll get you something around that bit of the city, and we'll try and find your wife just as soon as I've got time to deal with it." And he's like, "Okay, fair enough." It may sound like that was good, but if we fast forward a bit, what do we find? His wife is in Tumbleton. We've been told this twice. And so we're supposed to remember his wife has gone to Tumbleton. Where is it that Ormond Hightower attacks and sacks? Tumbleton. So in Hughes' mind, we've not seen his reaction yet, but I imagine next episode, in Hughes' mind, we will get this. Well, why did you delay? My wife is trapped in Tumbleton, and you've delayed getting her there, getting her from there, and now she might be dead. That who knows what's going on. He will start to get a little bit of a grievance going on here. And then we get Adam. Now, Adam, she doesn't actually give the chance. The other two, she says, "What name do you want?" She doesn't give him a chance to say what name he wants. She just calls him Adam of Hull, which is where he comes from. Hull, that's where the dockyards basically are on Driftmark. It's like you get the nice part of town, and then you get the dockyards, and the dockyards were called Hull. So she does not give him the opportunity to choose his name. This is significant because before that, we've had, if you'll remember, Corlys went through this long arc of getting to the point where he wanted to recognize his sons. And he can do a lot. He can recognize them himself. That's not, if he says these are my sons, that's fine. Nobody's going to dispute that. He can also get to choose who his heir is. And he can say, okay, it's going to be Alan. Fine. Nobody's going to stop that. And Rhaenyra is happy with both of those things. But the only person who can legitimize them actually change their surname so that they become Velaryons. So he is passing his inheritance on to House Velaryon. House Velaryon is not stopping with him. The only way that happens is if Rhaenyra says yes, and he just assumes she will. He goes into this just thinking, well, why wouldn't she? She's clearly okay with the bastard thing because she's got some bastard children of her own. So let's do this. But she says no. And the reasons she says no, you can sort of understand in that what was held against her all that time by Team Green was this idea that she's got bastard children and that the bastard children will inherit after her. And that was a stick that was used to beat her for a long, long time. And now, if her first act is to, as queen, is to legitimize the bastard children of her hand of the queen, then that's not going to go away. she's just going to be remembered as being this woman who's just legitimizes and doesn't really care about the sanctity of marriage, which will probably get her in trouble once more with the faith. And what will the people think? So that's her position. And so she says, "Look, I'm really sorry, I can't." But Corlys doesn't understand it. "I stood by you." And he did, to be fair. He stood by her all the way through those accusations and said it was up to her to, choose who her heir is and things like that, and who bears her name. And Corlys said, "I stood," and she said, "I'm really sorry, I can't do it." So he makes a scene. Now, if you look in the back, the most important thing is not. There's two important things. Firstly, it's him making a scene. The relationship between her and her hand of the Queen is breaking down, which means if you see when they're all sort of sat in that small council room, she asks for his advice and he says, "Well, whatever you want." He is not acting now as a good hand of the Queen to her. But the second thing, if you look in the background of that scene when Corlys is shouting, there's all the small folk there. They're out of focus, but they stop what they're doing. They stop working and they just kind of turn and look and they hear. So even despite her best efforts just to keep a lid on all of this, that news may well get out. That was a deliberate shot. I'm pretty sure they wanted us to know that the small folk behind there saw and heard. So what we've now got is 3 dragon seeds, Ulf, Hugh, and Adam, each of which have got potential for a grudge, an issue, a dividing, a wedge issue between them and Rhaenyra specifically. So that, I think, is another issue that is going to be an arc that's going to be carrying on this season. Where's that going to take them? They've suddenly risen to this great power, but they've all got reasonable reasons for dispute and contention. Okay. Talking about the small folk, though, the biggest issue for the small folk actually is food. This is for all of this coronation and knighting people and all of this stuff, we're brought right back down to real issues for real people. And then the real issue for the people of King's Landing has been the fact that they've been at war, and there's been a naval blockade that Rhaenyra herself put in, preventing food from coming in. And there's war that's been going on around the Riverlands, and not much food has come in. So they want it. And they probably thought, okay, so Rhaenyra probably thought, when she gets into power, the blockade has gone, things will slowly start getting better. But they haven't really. And there's a few reasons for this, one of which is a huge increase in the amount of dragons around King's Landing. They're eating all the sheep. Dragons eat a lot, and that is diminishing greatly the amount of meat available in the environments of King's Landing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the triarchy. You'll remember last episode when we got Aegon and Larys, they were escaping King's Landing, and then this incredibly random group of triarchy sailors appeared and killed their guards. That was very fortuitous for them. But it seems it wasn't just that. A lot of the triarchy fleet, they kind of like made landfall wherever they could, and they seem to have made landfall on the mainland and have just been pillaging, for want of a better word, which is also disrupting the food supply. And then thirdly, we get this accusation that the rich people of King's Landing, not necessarily the lords, though there will be some lords there, but also rich merchants and the like, they've been stockpiling food for themselves in their mansions and in their storehouses. If this food were freed up, then there would be a whole lot more to be going around. So Rhaenyra tries to help. She suggests, well, okay, maybe we can open up the Kingswood. The Kingswood is the big wood, which is sort of just south of King's Landing, between King's Landing and Storm's End. And that has traditionally been held by the king as their hunting grounds. And as the king's hunting grounds, it is therefore illegal to hunt unless you're there officially on king's business. So that's poaching. And now she says, well, can't we just let people go forage from there? They can get some food from there. And she immediately kind of like downscales it from the deer. Like Corlys is like, I don't think, can we talk about this in private? Because I don't think people will appreciate that, people being the 1%. And she kind of downgrades it. Well, maybe they could just go hunt, try and find some rabbits and things like that. But that is kind of being pushed off into the long grass. But that's not going to solve all of their problems. Because also another thing I probably should say, Vhagar has been sort of going off, raising the land as well. So there's no immediate solution here. But she thinks, okay, so we've got some stockpiled food, let's deal with that. And then she comes up with her rat feast idea, where she gathers these merchants and nobles and feeds them a meal of rats, things that the small folk were eating. It's to make a point, and she gives them this lecture. I mean, she's obviously right. There are people starving. These people here are hoarding food. It should be shared more equitably. But she does this in a very confrontational way, which will have made enemies amongst that group of people. And she says, okay, well, as we're speaking, my guys are going out getting all of the food from your areas that you've got stockpiled, and they're distributing it. And sure enough, she does herself go out and hand out food. This is good PR, as well as actually genuinely helping people. So this worked, but she definitely made a few enemies there along the way. She could have just tried to have a little polite word in their ear rather than call them in and then insult them to their faces. We do meet, as a part of this, just on her way out, we meet Torun Manderly, who, it's not 100% clear, but it seems that he probably was one of these rich people, which is a bit of a digression away from where he was in the books. So Torun Manderly is from House Manderly, a northern house, but the most southern-facing northern house that there is. They worship the Seven, for example. They care more about knightly stuff. They're culturally, because the family originally came from the south, culturally they're southern within the north. And he comes down with his brother to help out Rhaenyra. So they're very much, House Manderly are very much like the north. They're very much on Rhaenyra's side. In fact, actually, they didn't show it on the show, but in the books, Jace, when he goes on his mission and he stops off to try and, early on in the war, stops off to try and get help. He stops off with Jane Arryn, and he stops off at Winterfell talking to Greg and Stark. Between them, he stops off at White Harbour to talk to the Manderlys. The Manderlys are a very important house. They're the richest house in the north, and they are quite influential. So that's when Torun Manderly came down in the books, but here he seems to already be here, and I think this is just a placeholder. Keep an eye on that one. I'm not entirely sure what they're going to do with this character, because he should be he in the books he gets to be very important. In fact, he gets to be regent. He gets to be not really hand as through the end of the regency. He's the person who is ruling on behalf of Aegon III, who's a child and not old enough. So he does manage to base himself in King's Landing and gain some real power. So keep an eye on him. This isn't the last time we're going to see him. I don't know genuinely from their introduction where they are going to take this character, because he should be loyal to Team Black, but here it's not quite. He seems to be coming from a different starting point. So we've talked away through a lot of the issues that they've got going on. There are other things going on though, which is the banners. Simple practical stuff. The banners, they need to change the banners. They were all Team Green banners. Now they're going to need to take them down and put up new banners. There's an issue with, well, what about the servants, the people working in the Red Keep? Are there any House Hightower sympathizers there? You need to root them out. She gets Masseria to sort that out. There's the issue of the the Queen's Guard as well. Now, there was a King's Guard under, this is still, it's happening at relative pace. Under Viserys I, there was a full Queen's Guard. However, they split. There were 4 of them stayed with Team Green, 3 of them were on Team Black. And Rhaenyra is going through her Queen's Guard quite quickly. You may remember Stefan Darklin, who tried to bond with, I think it was Vercingetorix, failed. Then obviously we get Eric Cargill, died in that epic duel with his brother. And now Laurent Marbrand, who was guarding her door, he was the one who locked her in on Jace's orders. And she, as she was leaving, said, let him choose the manner of his death. So the Queen's Guard that she did appoint a few others, but the Queen's Guard she's had is being desperate. She needs more members of the Queen's Guard. She says, okay, Daemon can sort that one out. But there's the way this is kind of filmed, I quite like it. It feels kind of West Wing style, almost. Walk and talk everywhere. Going around, somebody coming in and telling her about another issue. She has to make a quick decision. They go away. Somebody else comes in, talks about another issue. And so the whole feel of this episode is that just this troubleshooting of things happening all the time. And what's noticeable, I think, is that this is all on her. This is not normal for how the Red Keep operates, how the Iron Throne operates, because the ruler often doesn't do any actual ruling. Some kings, like Aegon IV, Viserys I was quite similar, didn't actually do all that much themselves. They let their hand deal with the day-to-day running of things. They drank and had fun and held tourneys and things like that. They would be consulted on the big things, but the detail would be left to the small council and the hand. Rhaenyra has fallen out with her hand, Corlys. I mentioned that time that Corlys is there. We see it here, that Corlys is asked for his view on something, and he's just like, as the Queen wills, it's whatever the Queen wants. He's not here offering strong advice because there's a ruptured relationship there. And her small council, such as it is, she left on Dragonstone. When she came over, she brought over some people. We see Masseria. I'll talk about Masseria in a moment. She brought over Masseria, for example, but she left the rest of her small council there. Normally, you would expect these kind of matters to be dealt with by them. Yes, she can deal with the big matters, but the Hand of the King can be dealing with matters of the banners. Who does the banners? That's not really accommodation for dragon riders. That's not a matter for the Queen to be dealing with. But she doesn't give it to someone else. She said, "No, that's for me. I'll deal with that, but it'll have to be later." She doesn't have a person there who is providing the advice on how each individual great house is going to respond to this demand for tribute. She's doing all of this on her own. making all of her decisions. This is a bad management structure. She's the blockage. She might be making a lot of the decisions she makes are actually reasonable decisions. There's no indication that some things she misjudges and mishandles, but a lot of them she makes sensible, rational decisions. But it's all coming to her. She is the logjam. She is the reason why things are slowing down, because she is taking on everything herself. And so until she gets other people in, that is what's going to continue to happen. The questions are going to keep on coming to her because she's the only one authorized to be doing any of that. So I said I'll talk about Rosario. So let's talk about her briefly. She's the person that Rhaenyra talks to about the small folk more than anything else. She's getting her thoughts on that. She commissions her to be looking at, are there any potential traitors amongst the staff? And Rosario, out of all of these people, is the one who is positioning herself to be the most loyal. Last episode, she was saying, remember the people who are loyal to you. And she is also putting herself as opposed to Daemon. So if we get a position where the relationship between Daemon and Rhaenyra is tested, as it probably will when we get to the Rhaena question, Rosario is going to be the person who's saying, you couldn't trust him. You can trust me, but you couldn't trust him. So keep an eye on her. That is another thing that it'll probably be a slow boil, but we will get that there. She also is the only person who actually asks Rhaenyra how she is, how she's doing. She's been through a lot, the loss of children, the having to kill somebody, somebody that she's known since childhood. Suddenly, all of the pressures of power falling in on her, the fact that she's feeling responsible for making sure these people have food to eat, it's all weighing down on her. And actually, Rosario seems to be the only person who actually says, how are you doing? What are you feeling right now? And Rhaenyra's response, I think, is quite telling. It's like, I feel nothing. She has, as Alicent basically said, she's kind of blocked herself off. But she does say deep inside, there is this rage still at those who killed my sons. So keep an eye on that. The Rhaenyra arc is going to be how she manages the ruling, but also how this impacts on her personally. She's starting out very clearly, I want to rule well. I want to rule as me. I want to rule as my father would have wanted me to. How much is that going to slip? How much is the rage going to come to the front? What happens when the rage appears? She's mentioned it. This is Chekhov's rage now. It will happen. So all of this, if we kind of summarize what 40 minutes worth of Rhaenyra making every decision, taking all of the control and decisions in and of herself. But even though a lot of the things she does are completely understandable, she is setting up the seeds of all of these issues that will play out through this season. We've got the issue with the High Septon and the Faith. That is going to continue to play out. We've got the issue with the Dragon Seeds. That is going to continue to play out. We've got the issue with Daemon and Rhaena. That's going to continue to be playing out. The small folk, how they perceive her, the relationship with Corlys, her hand of the king, that is going to be pushing all the way through this season. I'm feeling sure. How the small folk perceive her, and also connected to that, obviously, whether they do actually get fed. What about the rich, the nobles and the merchants who she humiliated? How's that relationship going to work? So we've got all of these threads starting out in this episode, and we end up with her discovering that Darren is this fake, that this isn't actually Darren Targaryen. She finds out because basically Alicent could have played along. Alicent actually probably gained a few points here from Rhaenyra, because she could have realized what was going on and pretended that this was actually her son, but she doesn't. And so Rhaenyra then is faced with this realization that she has been duped by Ormond Hightower. So actually everything that she thought was going okay is not quite as going okay as it was before. She can't get crowned. She hasn't dealt with that army, with the dragon in the south and the potential extra claimant in Darren. The triarchy isn't actually fully dealt with because they're causing huge amounts of problems. Vhagar, she needs to kill Aemond on Vhagar. They've gone missing. She doesn't know where that is. They don't have money to do any extra stuff, so they don't have any kind of flexibility she can't rule effectively. So all of these things that she's thought of immediately, even like the dragon advantage, we've got the start of some disgruntlement amongst those dragon riders. So all of these things that she probably at the beginning of the episode felt she's got and she's achieved and are positive things for her, they're all starting to crumble down around her. This is just the start. It's not all gone bad yet, but we're starting to see this. So the kind of the closing shot is, I mean, they like doing the symbolism is clear. She says that we should burn the High Tower, the Team Green banners, and as that burns up, that's when she's told, by the way, Ormond Hightower has double-crossed you. She's discovered that Darren isn't Darren. So her burning the High Towers is the imagery. So that is clearly where we're at next, and perhaps the rage is going to come forward. In all of this, there are some storylines we obviously haven't picked up on. Aemond and Alice, that we're going to probably next time we'll pick up on. Aegon and Larys, they also they were heading towards Rook's Rest, if you remember last time. So we'll probably pick up on them again. We'll pick up on Rhaena, I'm sure, again next time. But here, this was, to return to where we were, this was the start of season 3. Forget the first 2 episodes were good, but they were the end of season 2. This is the start proper of season 3. The threads we see starting here are what is going to be running through this whole season. And I like it. I like the idea that what is going to hold this season together is this idea of actually ruling. What is the business of ruling like? What are the things that need to be priorities? What are the things that could be left to someone else? How do you actually manage the relationships there? This feels actually very Game of Thronesy to me. So kind of like the early seasons where we're actually seeing the Iron Throne at war, and what's it going to do? What are the alliances that it needs? Who do we need to talk to? What's the priorities? And what do we do when we've got no money? Because we will start to see, I suspect, also echoes of people like Cersei, Dany. We will probably be seeing echoes of at some point as well. But this season, I'm looking for it. It will effectively. This is going to be a 6-episode season, because so the arcs, as long as we don't get any more budget changes, the arcs are going to take us through to the end of episode 8, and then we get the final season, which will again presumably be 8 episodes. Okay, so all of that said, I enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think. What did I miss? I don't catch everything. Just human. There will be stuff I miss. I would love to talk about stuff again on Thursday. My live streams on this channel. So click on the bell, subscribe. You know the drill. But let me know down in the comments what else? What would you like to talk about? What are the things that you noticed in this episode? Because there was a lot of detail. But appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to some more live streams and things. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to Patreon, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so, in which case, thank you. I hugely appreciate it. But that is all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you soon.